It's the Kenner Chronicles, Ramblings of a Toy Junkie. Tonight's episode, The Return of Star Wars.
It's that time again. Welcome back, everybody. The Kenner Chronicles. There you go. Well, this is our second official episode. How's everybody out there doing? It's not like you can answer me, but hey, I'm going to talk about it anyway, right? I'm going to ask you how you're doing anyway. So let's get to it. Again, we're going to start with the topic, and then we're just going to ramble for about an hour. We got a mailbag to get to. We've got Marvel comics to read. We've got to talk about Kenner toys, of course, Star Wars. We're going to look at a non-Star Wars toy line. We got a lot coming up, so just sit back and listen and enjoy. Or at least I hope you enjoy. First off, one of the comments on our last podcast is, hey, can you not eat during the podcast? I don't eat during the podcast. I never eat. I know, it just sounds like I got marbles in my mouth. That's just how I talk. Sorry. I might have a sip of drink every now and then, but it's hard to talk for an hour. I'll try to hit that mute button next time I take a drink and then maybe edit something out. But like I've said before, I'm going to try to not do a lot of edits. And I know I stutter and I say words stupid and all that. But hey, that's just part of the fun. We're just going to have a free flow time. Sit back, talk about Kenner like friends. This is an educational podcast. I will teach you stuff, but it's not like I'm preaching to you. I'm just sitting here talking Kenner, and that's what we're going to do. So, what's the topic today? Well, we put out a fan poll at Kenner Toys on Twitter. Let y'all pick what the topic wanted to be, and it was a very close poll. The only one that wasn't close was Star Wars Kenner Slang, which means like, what does POTF mean? What does MOC mean? That one didn't get many votes. So what I did is I made a video today explaining these words. Like, if you're new to collecting, you might not know what MOC means. You might not know what COO means when you're looking at Star Wars figures, or you might not know DT, which means double telescoping. You might not know all this stuff if you're new to collecting. So I did a video. Again, it's mostly just for brand new collectors getting into this market. It doesn't just apply to Star Wars vintage. It applies almost to anything, except for exceptions like the DT, of course, is going to just apply to Star Wars. We talk about the small head, big head Han Solo. And that's something, maybe I'd like to do a video all about variations too. That might be a good video to do, because there's a lot of variations out there. But again, I did that video today. I threw it up on YouTube. Of course, if you're listening to the podcast on YouTube, it's going to be a week late. So it's already on the YouTube channel, so check it out either way. And for the YouTube listeners and the audio listeners on iTunes, thank you very much. But here's what I want to say before we get started with the topic is, the plan is that I'm doing this every other week, but it will be on iTunes and Google Play, Podbean, linked to on the website and everything. On Sunday night, maybe Monday morning. I'm going to try to do it Sunday night. If not, it'll be Monday at the latest. And then a following week, the weekend after that, they're going to go on YouTube. So if you're on YouTube and you're listening to one, you don't have to wait 2 weeks to get the next one. You can just go to the iTunes, or like I said, the website, and go ahead and listen to the next one. But if you just want to listen on YouTube, then you'll just wait every other week. So that's what the game plan is now anyway. So let's start with the topic. And this was very close. A topic that everybody voted for me to talk about. The Return of Star Wars. That's right. We're not going to talk vintage Star Wars today. We're going to talk the Return of Star Wars 1995. Whew. So for that, let's get into the mind frame of the 1990s before we get into 1995. Because there's some stuff leading up. There was some stuff leading up until the 1995 wave. So first, but let's talk vintage. Let's talk 1985. Star Wars Power of the Force was released. Now, in 1983, Return of the Jedi came out. Star Wars was slowly dying. I know you new people, you're out there saying, hey, Star Wars dying because they ain't had a movie. What? But there was, we had the Droids cartoons, we had the Ewok cartoons, we had some, Atari games, and maybe some little, but Star Wars was dying. He-Man was really on the heels of the toy lines. Master Universe was selling out the toy stores. Sadly, with no movie in sight, Kenner saw it. The sales were down. Power of the Force came out, and that was it. They killed the line in 1985. There was never no Series 2 for Power of the Force, sadly. After that, you had the Droids line and the Ewok toy line, which didn't sell too good, and that died out. So by the end of 1985, Star Wars action figure toys were gone. There was no toys. I mean, there were, leftovers, nothing new after 1985. So this was really what I consider a dark time for Star Wars fans. We didn't have anything almost between 1985 and 1995. I mean, we had, we had the books and comics in the early 90s, and then right around the end of the 80s, we had the role-playing games, but there was nothing mainstream for Star Wars fans during this dark time. Right around the early 90s, 92, 93, action figures really started to take off. You had Kenner still going strong starting up with the animated series line. I think that was around 93, so I don't have the year right in front of me. I'm going to say it's around 93, 94. You had Toy Biz with an excellent X-Men collection coming out of figures. You had the Batman figures from Dark Knight collection. And I've talked about it before. The 90s toy boom really started right there in the early 90s. People ask me sometimes, what made the 90s so special? Why was there a toy boom in the 90s? Well, I think it was we're that generation, Generation X, that grew up as latchy kids. If you don't know what that is, these are the kids that after school, we had a key and a kangaroo shoes. I've talked about that before on one of the test podcasts. But we'd come home and we would be alone. Unlike the generations before us where we would come home and usually mom would be there or something. We were probably like the first, I'm sure they all did it, but we was like the first generation, which they call it latchy kids. Where we would come home, spend the day alone after school, into the TV. That was our babysitter in the 80s and late 70s, early 80s. So I think that built us into a pop culture generation. Because if you look at the other past generations, they're not into pop culture. The baby boomer is not into this pop culture thing like we are. You see it now, the new generations, they kind of still have this sense of pop culture that we do. But it's us that grew up in the 80s that really connected. Something about us when we hit our 20s and adulthood, when we started losing that child side of us, we really longed for childhood stuff like the He-Man cartoon or Dungeons and Dragons. You remember that cartoon? Remember Saturday mornings? Oh man, Saturday mornings. We love Saturday mornings. Who didn't love Saturday mornings as a kid if you grew up in the 80s? And I know what you 90 kids and 2000 kids, your millennials are going to say, hey, we got cartoons too. Bullshit. Your cartoons, I'm not saying your cartoons are worse or your cartoons are better. It was a lot different. We had, you new kids don't even really know primetime networks really, but we on Saturday you had CBS, ABC, NBC cartoons in the morning, and it was like prime time for kids. It was huge. From about 7 o'clock till about 11, they would start drifting off into more. They would slow down with the cartoons right about 12 o'clock. But we all grew up watching these cartoons. He-Man, Superpower Friends. What is it? Superpower Friends? I know that's not the name of it. Superpower Friends. Super Friends. Sorry guys, it's like 11:30 at night. So we got the Super Friends, and I'm not going to sit here and name all these cartoons. You know that. But and I've talked about this before, that our generation really locked into this pop culture thing with not just cartoons, but with movies, music, just everything pop culture. So I think when the 90s came around, you were seeing a lot of these Generation X people getting out of school, starting to have jobs. Maybe they were in college, but they still have part-time jobs. We finally had our own money starting in the late 90s. And like a true Gen Xer, what do? Do we save our money to help us in college? Do we save the money to buy a house? No. We went back and bought our childhood. We went back and bought the stuff that we were missing because we longed for that childhood. And just walking into a toy store and seeing an X-Men figure. You're like, oh, I love the X-Men. But we didn't have X-Men figures in the 80s. The early 80s or the 70s. So you're like, whoa. And you love the cartoon. I think it was on Fox. So you had all this stuff flowing together. And there was this big this big boom that started in the early 90s. I remember our local comic book store had vintage Star Wars stores. I never even thought about buying vintage Star Wars stores, so I saw that happen. And it's just weird how it was a golden time for toy collectors right around that time. So let's get back on the Star Wars. Around 1993, action figures came back for Star Wars, and that wasn't really action figures. It was the Just Toy Bend-Ems. And I see this as kind of a test. This is what really probably helped Hasbro decide 100%. They came out. I mean, I'm not going to say they set the world on fire because they were Bend-Ems. None of their lines really blew out. But it was amazing to walk into a store. I won't forget, it was probably, like I said, I don't have the years in front of me. So when I say a year, I might give a year or two. 1993. Walking into a Kmart. This is the Kmart that I remember in my head having Return of the Jedi figures. I can see what aisle they're on and everything in my head. But since 1985, nothing Star Wars. So you know how it felt to walk into a store. I mean, you didn't see Star Wars shirts, you didn't see Star Wars posters, you didn't see. I mean, like now you can't walk into any store and not see something Star Wars while walking, 10 feet. You walk into a Walmart, you're going to see Star Wars before you can count to 10. You're going to see something Star Wars. Hell, I think you can go in almost any store. I bet you can go in Home Depot and find something Star Wars. But this was a different time where you didn't see anything Star Wars unless maybe it was a book. Especially at a store like Walmart or Kmart. So you walk into Kmart, turned around the toy aisle. There's the action figures. And then, right there in a half of a 4-foot section, Star Wars Bend-Ems. Whew, yes, they looked like shit. They were stupid. They had wires in their arms. You couldn't really play with them. They like rubber toys. But just seeing Star Wars on the shelf, it was amazing. It really took you back to being a kid again. I know those Bend-Ems really get a raw deal. People pick on them. And I was probably about the one I knew that collected them. Some of them was pretty hard to find. It was really fun to collect. It was just that, it wasn't that we liked the Bend-Ems. It was that they really brought us back. Hey, Star Wars is on the shelf. I remember I had a friend that owned a comic book store, and I saw him at that Kmart, and I called him up, and of course I had to use the payphone. We didn't have cell phones then. Yeah, you guys out there, that's you millennials, whatever you call them, y'all just don't know how it was to walk around with no phone. It was actually, in a way, kind of nice, but I would love my phone now too, so can't complain too much. But I called him up. It's like, Star Wars is in the store. I just couldn't believe what I was feeling. And he said, buy them all. Bring them to me so he could sell them. But, and I think at this time, the vintage was really starting to take off. You had online news groups. You had Prodigy, CompuServe, American Online. They were really having chat groups where vintage collectors would meet up. And news groups. And I think Hasbro was aware of this. And then at the same time, you had the toy collecting market really starting up, like I said, with X-Men and the Batman toys and probably Ninja Turtles and a lot of others I can't think of right now. Right around this time, probably a year later, 94, Bend-Ems been on the shelf for about a year. That's when you started hearing rumors. Yeah, it wasn't internet rumors. I guess there was some internet, some news groups and stuff about Hasbro bringing back Star Wars. And it wasn't like the day where you can, where you had a message board. You had, like I said, news groups. If you don't know what news groups are, they're kind of like a message board on the backside of the internet. Only really the geeks of the internet in the early 90s paid attention to the news groups. Or little chat clubs like on Prodigy. I was on Prodigy and then AOL at this time. But you couldn't really, you'd take you 10 minutes just to get a picture of something. But we were all taught back and forth, hey, Hasbro's going to bring back Star Wars. Now they brought, they were just buying Kenner in 93 at this time, or Tonka. Tonka was owned by Kenner. And it was all this rumor, it's coming back. And I was like, no, nothing was for sure. There was no way to get an official word. It wasn't like Hasbro had a website and put this out. Two magazines were essential at this time in the 90s. Action Figure News and Toy Figure Review. These were the must. And I know you people a little younger is going to say, what about Toy Fair? Well, that Wizard magazine didn't come out, I think, more until the late 90s. And as a collector, to me, Toy Fair by Wizard magazine was the kiddie collectible book. You know, it was, I don't want to say nothing bad about it. I know a lot of people that read it, but for hardcore collectors, or at least the ones I knew, was Action Figure News and Action Figure Digest, AFN. See, I keep forgetting the name of it now. Toe Marts and Action Figure News. Anyway, you would have these two magazines. They would come out, I believe it was Toe Marts, every month. That would have a price guide in it. I mean, that was wow. I mean, that's how you check prices. But that's what, when you went to toy stores, and toy shows in the 90s, that's what they used, that Toe Marts price guide that came out once a month. So that was really good to have back then. Now, if you want to know a price of something, you just go on eBay and check what it's been selling for. And sadly, I think people overuse that. People at flea markets and antique stores use that way to get prices. And when you're at an antique store or somewhere like that, you don't want to pay eBay prices. You're there to try to find a deal. But, see, I'm rambling on about something else anyway. So Action Figure News magazine, these toy magazines, I remember they would get letters from the public asking about Star Wars. And there would be little hints in there they would drop that they didn't know for sure either, or they wasn't saying that, yes, Star Wars is coming back. Maybe they were kind of hint to it. And nobody knew for sure. But I remember the issue, I think it was early 95. Finally got our first look. I think it was Toy Fair. Yeah, New York Toy Fair 95. We finally got our first look at Star Wars. It was back. These figures looked horrible. Luke Skywalker, I know you've all seen him. Luke Skywalker looks like He-Man. He's got his chest. He looks more like Fabio. You know, he's got his shirt open. His chest is showing. He's got these biceps and everything. And this is supposed to be Luke Skywalker from Tatooine. Not some Jedi future Luke Skywalker. You had Han Solo all buff. Even Princess Leia looked buff. She looked like a monkey. But we saw them at Toy Fair, and first there were some little pictures, but they were in them magazines. And finally, we knew for sure Star Wars was coming back in 1995. All we had to do was wait. We had no release date. I think we just were told summer of 95. And what Hasbro called this line, which I don't understand why they called it this, was Power of the Force. We already had Power of the Force in 1985. I don't know why Kenner or Hasbro at this time couldn't have called it something else, because it's confusing. Because I get people still today tell me, hey man, I got a Luke Skywalker from Power of the Force, what's it worth? And I said, well, let me see, what card is it on? Oh, it's Power of the Force 2. And that makes a difference. A Luke Skywalker from Power of the Force 95 is not worth anywhere near a Luke Skywalker from 1985 on Power of the Force. That's two very different Power of the Force toys. So I don't know why Hasbro kind of did that. But Star Wars was back, and believe me, you knew it was back. And I'll tell you about the first time I saw it back. Service merchandise. I went into service merchandise just looking for a Super Nintendo game. I believe it was a Super Nintendo game. And I said, well, let me just check the toy aisle. Boom, it was right there. I couldn't believe it. Because, we checked that whole day. Earlier that day, I went to Toys R Us that we had. We went to Walmart. And I think about all we had then was Kmart, Toys R Us, Toys R Us, Kmart, and Walmart. And service merchandise was a store you checked when you ran out or you got bored or you just had to pass it. If you don't know service merchandise, it was what they called a catalog store. I couldn't believe it. What was the first wave? Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, Chewbacca. Princess Leia wasn't out yet. R2-D2. And I think 3PO, if I remember correctly, 3PO was a little late coming out. Also, not as late as Leia. So that was, and I think there was a Darth Vader and a Stormtrooper. Now again, I'm just talking off the top of my head. If I'm missing somebody, I apologize to you. If you're listening, if you're the action figure listening that I forgot, I apologize. So that was it, service merchandise, and they were back. Not only were they back, you had the Falcon back. You had the Land Speeder back. And this is where vintage collectors got a little worried. I had a friend, too, that collected vintage. He was really into it long before I was. I think he started way back in the late 80s. He had stuff. Remember, he was a lot older than me. I was in my early 20s. This guy was probably almost the mid-30s. And he had a little studio thing above his house where he had boxed G.I. Joe, boxed Star Wars. It was amazing, and I wish I still knew this guy. I would love to see what the collection is now, but I remember he was worried in 95, started trying to sell stuff off because he thought, well, if Hasbro's back and they're reusing the same molds for the Falcon, the Land Speeder, and the TIE Fighter and X-Wing, he thought his stuff was not going to be worth shit anymore. He thought, why would somebody pay $60, $70 for an old X-Wing fighter when you can pay $20 and get a better looking X-Wing with the same mold? But I don't think he realized then that the vintage market was more about nostalgia than was about fancy lights and everything. But they used the same mold, but I'll give it to Hasbro. They knew to change it up. They added new new sound effects, new lights and everything on the Falcon. Different kind of paint scheme. So even like the X-Wing and the Falcon, which was the very same mold as the vintage Kenner line, it was so different with the color and everything that you couldn't really get them mixed up. Now there are some little parts here and there if you don't know what to look for. Like I remember the X-Wing canopy was I think a little darker in the 95 and then the vintage series. But yeah, little things like that did kind of match up, but they always try to make them a little different. And I give that. I know I rag on Hasbro a lot, but I'll give Hasbro that they really cared enough. They could have just slapped the same molds, the same everything, and kind of, I guess, said, screw you collectors. In fact, right around this same time in 95, they released what they called a classic 4-pack. This was Luke Skywalker, Chewbacca, Han Solo, and Darth Vader. I believe that's the 4. Again, I'm trying to remember this. Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Chewbacca, and Darth Vader. I think that was it. These were 4 vintage-looking figures. Yep, that's right. Kenner re-released vintage figures. Now, if you took them out of the package, you could tell a little difference. One's a CCO. Well, that's the country of origin, but I think that was different, and then they had a different year. It had 95 on their legs. But they looked almost identical. If you took a Luke Skywalker vintage and that 95 classic one and put them together, it was very hard to tell the difference by just glancing at them. They had the weapons. These weapons felt a little more rubbery than the vintage ones. But they came out with this classic pack, and collectors went upset. These vintage collectors like, what are you doing, Hasbro? You re-releasing vintage figures? You know, for $20 you get 4 vintage figures. The people that sold vintage line, like my friend that owned a comic book store, said, oh God, they're going to hurt, that side of the toy side of my business doing this. Hasbro, again, I want to say something. I'm staying positive with Hasbro. Hasbro said, look, I remember it was in one of the action figure news magazines. Hasbro said, we realize there are collectors out there. We don't want to alienate the collectors. We don't want to upset the collectors. We did this anniversary 4-pack, and we're not going to do any more. They kind of learned that lesson. They kind of said, well, we don't want to upset the vintage collectors, which I applaud Hasbro for that. Like I said, that was very good of them to do. I know some people's listening probably saying, well, if you can tell the difference, why does it matter? And in fact, I love that 4 set vintage set. And a part of me did want to see Hasbro maybe re-release some classic stuff like that. But I can understand as a collector of vintage stuff, you don't want to flood that market with new stuff either. What I would have liked to see Hasbro do is maybe do some figures that look like vintage figures that we didn't get. Tarkin, maybe from the new movies. I think that'd be kind of neat if they can make it look vintage. That's the problem. Because you got a lot of toy companies out there now, like Funko had a reaction line that was supposed to look old. But yeah, they look kind of old, but when you look at them, they don't really look... They look like they're trying to look old. Does that make sense? So I would love if Hasbro could find a way to maybe do some vintage looking figures, maybe a Tarkin, or maybe some we didn't get. That'd be kind of neat, I think. Or, I wouldn't want to flood the stores with them, but just kind of do as a special, maybe online thing, or a special thing for collectors that's into the vintage. But as I was saying, they knew that the collector's market was out there in 95. They didn't want to hurt us vintage collectors, which that's always made me happy with Hasbro. I know I give Hasbro a lot of grief, but at least they were willing to do that, to kind of know, hey, we don't want to screw them. So 1995 came out. Finally, Star Wars was back on the shelf. And like I said, these look, I remember we kind of laughed at how bulky and hot they looked. You know, they look like a bunch of male models or something with muscles. And they had the Falcon, you being used the same mold, but these figures were bigger. You couldn't hardly get Lando and Chewbacca and the Falcon cockpit together. By the end of 95, we have Wave 2. Again, this is going to go off the top of my head, so if I forget anybody, sorry. I know it was Boba Fett, a Han Halt, I think a Sand Trooper, maybe. Boba Fett, Han Halt, Lando, Dagobah, Luke Skywalker, and a TIE Fighter pilot, rounded out 95. And Star Wars was back, and we were happy it was back. Like I said, I know they didn't look like Star Wars, but we didn't care. They were Star Wars. We were just happy to walk into the store and see Star Wars back again. Now, I've seen this debate online a couple of times. People say, when was the best time to grow up or know about Star Wars? And I see people say, well, it's probably the prequel era. I've heard people say that, well, hey, you got to grow up with it on video. The original trilogy, and then you got to grow up with the prequels and into the new stuff. But for me personally, the best time to grow up was like I did. I saw Star Wars. I remember when there was no Star Wars. Kinda. I was like 5 or 6 going into Star Wars, so it's hard to remember a time without Star Wars. But I got to experience Star Wars when the world experienced Star Wars. And that's what I like. Everybody, all my friends and everybody found Star Wars at the same time. And I got to see that. I got to live through that, original release time. And then I had to, me and my buddies, made it through them dark years from 85 to 95 when there was hardly anything Star Wars. And Star Wars was kind of forgotten. And then in 95, 97, we got to sit through the special edition. And say what you will about the special edition. Say something about, Jabba looks like crap, because he does. Say, oh, they took this out, they added that, they did this, they changed that. We didn't care in 1997. Why? Because we got to see Star Wars on the big screen. And not just Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. We got them all on the big screen. We didn't care what they added. The Empire Strikes Back could have had George Lucas pop in the middle of it and take a shit on the camera. We wouldn't care because we got to see Star Wars on the big screen. Now I know all you young kids, y'all got big TV screens in your house and you got Blu-ray players, so it probably looks better seeing it at home anyway. But, experiencing the original Star Wars on big screen, please, Fox, Disney, whoever can, let's show those original 3. It's the 40th anniversary. Why didn't you bring them back out? I don't understand. Camera. But anyway, like I said, people say, when's the best time to grow up? To me, that's the best time. So in 97, I got the experience on the big screen again. And then 99, The Phantom Menace. The prequel era. That's right, I got to sit through the prequel era. And I got to take my niece to see the prequels. She was probably about 10 at the time. So I got to go and enjoy that with her. And then when I thought Star Wars were all dead, I got a mind blown up again when Disney bought Lucasfilms. Back in the 80s, you would never have thought that Disney would own Star Wars. So then, about this time, my kids are at the age where they could enjoy The Force Awakens. And I don't care what anyone says, The Force Awakens is a good movie. I know you're going to say, oh, it's a rehash, or it's a remake of A New Hope. You're going to say all this cliche stuff that you read on the internet. But sorry, The Force Awakens is a good Star Wars movie. Is it better than The Phantom Menace? Hell yes. And if you say it's not, then something's wrong with you. Either that or you're real little when you saw The Phantom Menace, so you just see it different than someone my age. So now I got to take my kids to see The Force Awakens. And then I get to go see a Star Wars movie that's not part of the Skywalker episodes, which blows my mind. I would never have thought that in the 80s. I would get Rogue One. Did I love Rogue One? No, I haven't. I've been very clear about it, that I thought it was weak on character, that I thought I enjoyed it, but it's not a movie. After seeing it 3 or 4 times, I think I don't really need to see it again anytime soon. Unlike The Force Awakens, I can watch almost every day. But then I get to take my kids to that. And I get to take my son to Force Friday this year. So I get the experience. Like I said, I get the experience Star Wars, the whole world learning about Star Wars. And then I get to see it again. I get to experience and take in Star Wars again in my early 20s, that independent, when you really become independent. And then the prequels come, and I get to start sharing Star Wars with, family that wasn't born during the original trilogy. And then you get the Disney years where I get to give Star Wars to my kids. Now, I'm not going to try to take anything away from anyone out there that didn't grow up in the original trilogy time, because you all experience the same way. You all experience on your own, so you're all going to, have your enjoyment too. Just me personally, I'm very glad that I got to grow up during that original trilogy time, because to me, I don't know about you or who's listening to this, but the 80s, the grow up in the 80s was a great time. I was looking at something here. I was pulling up movies from 1985. I was just seeing what was released in 85, and there was probably 10 classic movies just on the first page I went to. And what do you get? 3, maybe 4 good movies a year if you're lucky now. But you had like 4 or 5. You had probably 10 classic movies in 1985. I wish I had the list still right here in front of me. Well, we talked about the return to 1995, so now it's time for classic Marvel letters. That's right. This is the part of the show where we take a letter from Star Wars. Well, see, I said it wrong. Star Words. That's hard to say, isn't it? Today's issue comes from classic Star Wars Marvel, issue 63. And let me see what year this is from. I should have all this ready. September 1982. So we were still a little less than a year away from Return of the Jedi. Eric Trimple from Buffalo, New York writes into Marvel. Dear people, I know a lot of... Dear people, what? Okay. That's just a weird way to start it, ain't it? Okay, should say Dear Marvel or something. Okay, let me get back to the letter now. I know a lot of the letters you receive contain suggestions. So here goes. You ought to have Jabba the Hutt receive the frozen body of Han Solo. A storyline with Han being thrown out and attempting to escape Jabba's men could cover several issues and have Han back in earlier comics. It'll be nice to see him again and in the present tense instead of flashbacks like a couple issues ago. When Han Solo went out of the series, it lost a lot of its culture until Star Wars 59 came close with the tale of an interstellar shopping center. Beautiful. But for a while, you guys were going war happy. And let's see what Marvel wrote back to Eric from Buffalo, New York. As we said before, the mystery of Han Solo will have to wait until Revenge of the Jedi. There will be a Han Solo flashback adventure in this year's annual to hold you over. But look at the bright side. You have less than a year to go. So this guy wanted this guy wanted Marvel to free Han Solo in the comics. Come on, Buffalo, New York guy. You know they're not gonna show how Han Solo gets unfrozen in the Marvel comic books. You know that's how the comic books. You know they got to save that for at the time Revenge of the Jedi. I almost said Revenge of the Sith just out of habit. So thank you for that's from issue 63 again. From the classic Star Wars Marvel. Again, I like to just read those because they kind of take me back. I talked about this last time. They just kind of take me back to a mind frame of people back then. That's from 1982. That's just something that's really, really fun for me to read.
Next, another interesting story that's in the news.
Let's see what's in the news with Kenner. And what we're going to talk about, the same thing almost that we talked about last time for in the news. The Topps trading cards. As you know, 2 weeks ago we talked about how they were releasing carded figures that you had to pay 99 cents for a pack. Well, you might get them or you might not. Well, now Topps has released Out of the Box series. And these are trading cards on the Star Wars virtual trading card app. But they're loose figures. They're doing a new figure every day. I don't know for how long. But every day at 1 p.m. Eastern, they release a new one. It's 5,000 credits to buy them. And they're really not that hard to find. It says like 1 in 5 chance of getting it. Sometimes it takes a lot longer than that. Yesterday it took me about 15, 20 packs somewhere between there to pull the newest one. Today I pulled it on the first try. So it's very random. But if you're into that Star Wars trading card app, they do have the Kenner loose ones now. I don't have them all, and this is where I'm going to complain. But there's a lot of assholes on that trading card app. What's the deal? I don't understand why there's such greedy people on this thing. Like, one of the cards I don't have yet, I think, was Stormtrooper. I can't remember. It was either that or Tusken Raider. This guy had, they come on different colors. The background's like a yellow and a green. I don't know all the colors, but this guy had like 5 of them. And I tried to trade him a bunch of shit for it. He wouldn't give me 1. He had 5. What's the deal with these people? And everybody's like, oh, this card has this many card counts on it. This one has this many numbers on the back. So I don't care. I just want the vintage. I just want the cards. I don't care about how many of this one they made, how many of that one they made. If I got a card, if I got 5 or something, shit, anybody can have it. I don't give a shit. It's not like they're real cards. I don't understand these people. This one guy, like I said, he had all the vintage figures with a different color background, probably 5 or 6 each. And here I'm trying to trade him, giving him way too many cards. Will he trade with me? No. And what else do these people do that play this game? They cancel your trade. That's right. They say no. Do they make a counter? No. Do they put up there in the little chat box, hey man, I'd like to trade with you, but this is what I'm looking for? No. They just cancel it and move on. That's it. But why are they so greedy? That's what I don't understand. If I had 2, let's say R5D4 is the new one that's out today. If I have 2 of them, then shit, anybody can have the second one. I don't care. I don't understand. I wouldn't have 5 of them and sit there and like, King, top trading card man, bring thy cause before me. That's why I almost quit playing this. Until the vintage stuff, the Kenner stuff started coming, I really stopped playing it. I would collect my money daily, my credits, and I might buy something here and there when I was bored. But other than that, I don't understand this mind frame of the people that won't trade with you. If you got more than 1, why the fuck do you care? Just give it to me. I mean, I'm sure there's something that you can trade for. Don't just cancel my trade. But and I don't understand why somebody would have 5 or 6 of a card and not just hand them out freely. If I had 6 cards of R5D4, I'd just give them to anybody that asked. It just takes the fun out of this card app because of these people. Who are these greedy people? If you play this app and you know these people, or you're one of these hoarders that hoard these cards and like you have gold, let me know why. What's the big deal? If I don't care about the card count. I'll give you a card count of 100. If you give me a card, if your card count's 1,000, I think the card count just means how many they made. I don't care. I just want my vintage figures. I think there's 2 I don't have because I got tired of trying to deal. Like I said, they'll count. I'll send a trade. They won't counter back a trade. They'll just cancel it. No, thank you. I got 6 of them, but you're gonna have to give me better than that. You're gonna have to beg for them. Oh, man, sometimes I just hate people. But that's Kenner in the news. Like I said, we don't have much Kenner news, sadly. So we're talking about tops again. And when you're dealing with a 30-year-old company that's already come up with the news every day. But don't worry, the podcast isn't over yet.
And that's the way the news goes.
And here's something I want to discuss. I was going to save it for a main topic, but then I don't know if I can do a whole... I don't know if it's something that deserves the main topic. It's some debate we got on the Twitter on Kenner Toys about, and I thought I would talk about it here and see what you guys think. Maybe you can let me know. What is an action figure? I know you're saying that's easy. What is considered an action figure, and what is considered an accessory or a creature? I'll put it this way. Wampa, action figure or creature? Tauntaun, action figure or creature? Now you're saying that's pretty simple. Tauntaun's not an action figure. Wampa's not an action figure. Here's where the debate got a little sketchy. Max Rebo Band came in a box set. It's not listed on the back of the card on the figure count. Would you consider Max Rebo Band action figures, or is that more of the creature? I consider them action figures. I don't see how you wouldn't, because they're action figures. They're figures and they're animals. And probably the one that most people didn't agree with me with, but some did, Jabba the Hutt. Is Jabba the Hutt a action figure? Now somebody told me he's a playset. I was like, no, he comes with a playset. the throne room that he sits on is the playset. So you get a playset with a Jabba the Hutt action figure. Another guy told me he can't be an action figure because he's not on a card. Well, that's not exactly true, because I guess you could say Max Rebo Band and them's not action figures. They're not on a card either. What if Blue Snaggletooth? He's not an action figure. He wasn't on a card. I know some people's going to say he's just a variant, but I count Blue Snaggletooth. I count Blue Snaggletooth as an exclusive Sears figure. That's the way I look at it. But Jabba the Hutt, is Jabba the Hutt an action figure? Yes. To me, he talks in the movie. He's an alien. He's not a creature. He's not a Tauntaun or a Rancor or a Wamba or something like that, or a Bantha. He interacts with the other stars of the movie. He talks. He has his own language. He has his own thought. He's not a creature. He's not an animal. As Han Solo said, he's a wonderful human being. But to me, he's an action figure. So I'm just going to put it out there and see what y'all think. Is Chewbacca an action? I mean, not Chewbacca. Is Jabba the Hutt an action figure or a playset? Is he an action figure or a creature? Is he an action figure or just something else in between? What do you count him? I count him as an action figure. I know everybody's different, but I'm just curious of what everybody else here thinks. I thought it was a nice little topic to talk about and maybe explain why I think he's an action figure.
Hey folks, viewer mail time again.
Now it's time for the mailbag. I've asked people to send in questions and stuff. We didn't get a lot of questions, but we got something better than questions. I got some real mail, a box, and let me get the guy's name for it. I don't forget it because I want to thank this guy a lot. His name is Malcolm. He's known as the Hidden Woodsman. Thank you, Malcolm. He sent me a box. He put a comment on one of my podcasts or one of our videos that he had some stuff he wanted me to send that he had no use for, I guess, anymore. It was a very nice suggestion. I mean, believe me, if you want to send me something, send me something. I love getting. Who doesn't like getting mail, right? Who doesn't like getting a package? But this blew my mind. I got it today and I opened it up. It was a heavy, sturdy box. A lot of comics from the Dark Horse issues were in there. My son's going to love those. I know one was a Django, and I'm sorry I don't have the box right in front of me. But this was amazing stuff in this box. But here's what was the best thing in it. A Gamorrean Guard on Return of the Jedi card. Yes, a vintage Gamorrean Guard on card. And not only that, a Claytu on card. Yep, on Return of the Jedi card. So thank you, Malcolm. Thank you, Woodsman. That is amazing. And also he had I know I preach and I criticize about reproductions. Now I'm going to throw some pictures up on Twitter and stuff, all this a little later. So look at Kenner Toys on Twitter. But it's a Greedo card, which you can tell looking at the card, it's not, the normal Greedo card. He sent me this nice framed stamp collection of some of the stamps that came out, I think, around the time Revenge of the Sith did. Sadly, the glass got busted during shipment, but things happen. He got me a little R2-D2 little playset. I think it's from the Micro Machines from the 90s. My son, I love playing with that. Like I said, it was mostly a lot of comic books that I know my son's going to really enjoy. So there's a lot of stuff in there mostly for my son to enjoy. But he sent me vintage figures. Dude, you are like the coolest person ever. Who does that? 2 vintage figures and then a custom vintage figure of a Greedo. That is amazing right there. So again, Malcolm, I just want to send this out to you. I want to say thank you. I was very surprised. Once I was honored that you even wanted to give them to me, and to let you know they're going to go to a good home. I already got the vintage figures back on my wall, which makes me happy. I had 2 open spaces on my wall because I had to sell 2 figures last month. As some of you know, I had a rough time at the beginning of the year. I was laid off work. I'm back at work now, but I've been having to sell some of my vintage stuff to catch up. All last month I was working, but I didn't get paid for about 3 or 4 weeks. So I'm really behind. So then the 2 I sold, I've got 2 more figures back in its place now. So thank you, Malcolm. It means a lot to me. Really, it does that you would do that. So everybody give Malcolm a big round of applause. I'm really impressed that somebody would think enough of my videos on YouTube and maybe my Twitter and everything to do that for me. That would want me to have something like that. Again, his name's Malcolm. He's known as the Hidden Woodsman. He has a website, but I don't want to give all that out because I'm not sure what he wanted me to say and what he didn't want me to say. So keep an eye on my Twitter or maybe upcoming video. He makes some stuff online, but I don't want to give his website out until I get the okay. So just check back on Twitter with that. And then I don't think he has Twitter. If he does, I'll get his Twitter name so everybody can thank him with me, because that's amazing. You're the man. I mean, you sent me some vintage figures. That's like buying a girl diamonds. I mean, I'll come cut your grass. I'll come drive you to the airport. I'll come whatever you need me to do for you now. Because, man, you sent me vintage. Not just you sent me vintage figures. You sent me vintage carded figures. Come on, dude. Again, thank you, Malcolm. I'm very honored that you thought enough of me to send me that stuff. It means a lot to me. So really, thank you, Malcolm. Thank you, Woodsman. Thank you for doing that. So everybody, please check out Malcolm's website, thehiddenwoodsman.com. I took a look at it. They got some awesome backpacks and stuff. In fact, I probably need some backpacks while this traveling I'm doing. So I'm going to have to really look and see what he's got, because he's got a huge variety of them. So again, thank Malcolm for me by visiting his website and checking out his videos. There, he's got a link to YouTube and all that. It's called thehiddenwoodsman.com. And if you're into hiking and mountain climbing and all that stuff, you really want to check out some of his gear. He's got some really amazing looking stuff. So again, check it out, thehiddenwoodsman.com. And now let's move on to shameless plug. Yeah, I bet you love that. This is the part where I beg for something. I know, I just got a box of vintage figures. I'm sitting here finna ask for something else. But I really hate to do this. Like I said, it's been a very trying 7 months. I'm back at work now, but I was invited with passes to Hasbro's first con. And they promised me themselves that they're going to have Kenner there. Some stuff pulled out of like Kenner's warehouse on show, on display. I want to cover this so much, but I really need help with the airlines. I think I might be able to budget into the hotels, but I set up a GoFundMe for anybody that wants to help. I know what you're saying. Oh God, this guy's going to beg for money, but I see people all the time with GoFundMe asking for a lot worse than that. I think if I can just get enough for airfare, which is looking at about $300 to get there and back, and maybe a hotel room. That's all I'm asking. And I'm not even asking you to donate to my GoFundMe or my Patreon without anything. If you don't want to do that, just go buy a t-shirt. I get a couple of dollars for every t-shirt sold. You can find a link to the t-shirts at StarWarsJunk.net. Patreon, you can find at StarWarsJunk.net. GoFundMe, you can find on my Twitter or Star Wars Junk account. I need to put that on the website. But again, I think it's September 10th, the second weekend of September, is Hasbro's first con. HasCon is what they're calling it. I don't want to just, I do want to go, but I want to cover it. I want to be able to, share whatever Kenner stuff they got there, or Hasbro stuff they got, with everyone on Twitter, everyone on YouTube. I want to make a video about it. I really want to go to this thing. And I know what you're saying. Well, go. But like I said, it's been a very hard 7 months. And every year, I take my son to Dragon Con. It's kind of like the Comic Con of the Southeast. It's in Atlanta, which luckily I live, like an hour away from Atlanta, so that's not a problem. We already got that all planned out. I've been saving for that, which really doesn't cost that much, being that we do it without a hotel or anything. We only go one day. We only go on Saturday. My son looks forward to it every year. I go every year just for the fun of it, but it's mostly about him now. So I didn't want to take that away from him and say, well, we can't do that because I got to go to this Hasbro thing. So I'm trying to budget. I'm trying to catch up for that 1 month where I worked and I didn't get paid, and now I'm trying to catch back up. So like I said, I'm going to sit here and beg for money. But if anybody wants to support the GoFundMe, because it's going to not only help me, it's going to help me share Hasbro with everyone else. Maybe get word out about this Hasbro Con, so where next year you're like, oh man, I got to go. Or if they've got some, Kenner stuff from their archives on there, I can take pictures of it and talk about it and share it with everybody. So again, you can go to Patreon, patreon.com/StarWarsJunk. The link's at StarWarsJunk.com. I got to GoFundMe. You can find that on my Twitter account at Kenner Toys or Star Wars Junk on Twitter. And again, if you want to donate, but you don't want to just donate for nothing, not get anything, Check out our t-shirts. We got we got a Kenner t-shirt. We got a Bruce Wayne t-shirt. We got all kinds of t-shirts up there. And every time you buy one, I get a little bit of that. And anything I get on Patreon, anything I get on GoFund, or anything I get on t-shirt sales goes into not just trying to get me to HasbroCon, or HasCon. I think it's a stupid name. But it helps with the website. You know, it's going to help me do better podcasts. I was able to save up enough money on t-shirt sales to get a mic. If you notice, the mic's a lot better. So I'm hoping to get a better camera, and I'm hoping to all that. So yeah, this is the part where I say, and I know, I feel like I hate this part because I feel like I'm begging for money, but I see every other YouTuber and podcaster is doing it, talking about Patreons. I don't want to spend a whole 10 minutes talking about it, and it's almost too late. But again, anything you can do, Patreon, GoFundMe, or buy a t-shirt. It's really going to help me out in this Hasbro thing. I would really love to see it. And like I said, if I can just get enough for airfare to get me there, I might have enough to cover the hotels. I know on GoFundMe I put a goal of $1,000. That was way high goal. I just typed in something, so I think I can do it a lot cheaper than that. I think if I can get about $500, that will get me there and get me in a hotel, and I can, I'll pay the food and everything else myself because I'm sure I'm going to want to buy more. Sorry, that's my computer beeping at me. But again, I don't want to keep on about it, but that's my little plea for the day. Now, we'll move on from that. Now, this is part of the show. If you listen to the last one, you know that this is the part of the show where we talk about something Kenner that's not Star Wars. Because I know people saying, hey, I like Kenner, but I'm not really into Star Wars. I'm into other things. My plan was to talk about The Shadow. Anyone remember that movie with Alex Baldwin? Kenner did a whole line of action figures for it. It's not really an action figure line as, people's beating down the door to get. But I know this guy named Adam Pose, really great guy. We did a podcast about Star Trek Playmate toys a couple of weeks ago for his Sequel Quest podcast, which is a great podcast. If you get a chance, I'll have links and everything on Twitter. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, down in the description, I should have links all down there. It's a Sequel Quest podcast where him and his buddies, they talk about movies that maybe didn't have a sequel, or maybe they did have a sequel, but a sequel they would like to see. But it's a very good podcast. I'm going to be honest with you, I've only listened to a couple of episodes, but I'm really intrigued by it, so I'm going to go and make sure I'm going to try to listen to more on next week when I'm on the road. It's called Sequel Quest Podcast. Again, I'll have links and everything on Twitter, and then in the description of this on iTunes and all that. You should be able to find links and everything. But like I said, we end the show talking about a non-Star Wars Kenner item. And I talked with Adam about the Shadow. I thought, okay, well, we'll talk about 10 minutes about the Shadow figures. I mean, come on, what can we say? We'll end up talking about an hour. So I'm not going to tack that on to the end of this podcast. So that was my plan. I'm going to do that as a special episode. But I do want to leave you with something that's not that's not Star Wars, so that's how we end the show. And we're going to talk about one of the coolest Joker figures. And I know what you're saying, when it comes to Joker, how can I have just one cool Joker figure? But this is it. It's from the Dark Knight collection. Now, I don't know if you remember or not, but when the Batman 1989 Batman came out, Toy Biz had the rights. They only made Batman, Joker, and Bob the Goon. I think that's the only three they made, which really didn't look anything like anybody from the movie. Maybe Bob the Goon, maybe a little bit. But by the time Batman Returns came around, Kenner had the rights. And they went back and made a Batman from the first movie, which they called the Dark Knight Collection, where they kind of took from both movies. You had Catwoman, you had a lot of Batman, you had a Robin. You had a penguin that looked like the Superpowers penguin. It looked nothing like the Danny DeVito Batman Returns penguin. I still don't know what's up with that. But the figure I want to talk about is the best Joker. Oh, maybe not the best looking Joker, of a Batman line. The most fun Joker, I'll say. This is Sky Escape Joker. And what I like about this is based on Jack Nicholson, or it's supposed to be from the picture on the card. To me, it looks a little bit more like Cesar Romero in the old Batman TV show. Looks like kind of a cross in between. I mean, when I look at the figure, I can see Jack Nicholson, but I can also see that old school Joker. Kind of morphed them together, it looks like. But what was so cool about this Joker? You dipped his head in water and his face changed colors. Yep. You have the classic Joker face, you dip him in water, and it becomes flesh toned. It looks kind of, I mean, it doesn't look like Jack Nicholson. It looks kind of goofy because he's got that big Joker smile and everything. He still has the green hair, but he's got flesh tones. But I love that feature. And something about Kenner, or most toys back then, and probably maybe might be still true today, if you have one gimmick like that in a toy line, almost every other toy would have that same kind of gimmick. But I never really saw this flesh-killing, changing skin with water thing in any other line. Again, it's the Sky Escape Joker. If you're into Batman, check it out. If you can't get you a loose one, it's fun to play with. That's like I said, it might not be the best looking Joker. I think the animated series is probably one of my favorite Jokers. Now they got a little crazy with Joker when they did Legends of Batman. I think it was a pirate Joker. I never got into all that. But this is again Sky Escape Joker. You dip him in water, with his head in water, and it changes from his clown makeup to skin tone. And that's just a really cool little gimmick that Kenner came up with. And that's what I wanted to end the show with. Again, like I said, we're going to have the Shadow Special Edition podcast coming up in a couple of days, or maybe by the time you hear this one, it might already be on there. So look and see. Again, we're on iTunes, we're on Google Play. You can go to StarWarsJunk.net. You can listen to it there at StarWarsJunk.net. Or our Star Wars podcast. I don't want people to forget we also have a Star Wars Junk podcast, so please check that out. You can find links to all this stuff, from the podcast to the Patreon to the shirts to the Twitter accounts to everything you can think of is going to be on StarWarsJunk.net. Again, I want to say this for anyone listening. If you're into mass Kenner toys, or you're into superpowers or Ghostbusters, or you have a podcast, you want to come on this one and talk Kenner, you want to talk Ghostbusters, you want to talk superpowers, you want to talk mask, if you know that, please reach out to me. You can email me at KennerToys@StarWarsJunk.net, or just junk@StarWarsJunk.net. You can find me on both Twitter accounts. You can find me on YouTube. But please, that's what I'm looking for. I find it very hard to find people that want to work together on YouTube videos or podcasts. And I think that's the way you really grow as a podcaster and a YouTuber, is I'll take from your audience, you take from my audience, and we'll grow together. But it really seems to be hard to find people that want to work together. If you're a superpowers collector, you don't have to have a podcast. Maybe you're just a guy out there that just collects superpowers and you want to talk about it. Come on, just send me an email. Let's start the ball rolling. And like I said, you can come on the last 10, 15 minutes of the show and talk about what you collect, about mask or the superpowers and all that. Really fast. You can just find me at Star Wars Junk or Kenner Toys on Twitter. I'm always on Twitter unless I'm doing a podcast or a video, it seems like. So again, I want to thank you all for listening. And again, if you're listening to this on iTunes, leave me a comment. Please leave some comments. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, give us a thumbs up. You can leave comments there too. I love reading comments. But again, I'm rambling because that's what I do. This is the Kenner Chronicles, rambling of a toy junkie. And we'll be back again in 2 weeks.